Some stories don't come from books. They come from front porches and kitchen tables, passed down by folks who lived them. This one's about a woman named Eliza Hartley and a small Colorado town that judged her before they ever knew her heart. It's about the kind of goodness that doesn't ask for applause, and the one man who saw it when nobody else would. If you ever felt invisible, if you ever wondered whether kindness matters when no one's watching, well, this story might feel familiar. Settle in. Take your time. Some truths move slow, like bread rising in a warm kitchen. Mrs. Pritchard's voice cut through the morning air like a rusty blade. Poor thing. Who'd bid on her basket? Eliza Hartley kept walking. Her fingers tightened around the wicker handle until her knuckles went white. The two women outside the dry goods store didn't bother lowering their voices. Why would they? She was just the fat Hartley girl. Had been since she was 12 years old. The May sunshine fell warm on Main Street, but Eliza felt cold straight through. A child waved at her from the milliner's window. Tommy Miller, gap-toothed and grinning. His mother yanked his arm down, pulled him back from the glass like Eliza carried something catching. She didn't stop, didn't turn her head, just kept her chin up and her feet moving, one boot in front of the other, the way Mama taught her. The church social was tomorrow. The basket auction. Lord knew she shouldn't have made that fried chicken. If this story brings someone to mind, a person who gave without asking for thanks, I'd be honored if you'd share where you're listening from today. Good folks are still out there, and it's a comfort knowing we're not alone. Daniel Brooks ran the curry comb down the mare's flank, working out the dust from yesterday's ride. His shoulders burned. Get the knee. Good burn. Honest burn. The kind that meant a man had earned his keep. The Henderson Ranch sat quiet in the early light. Somewhere behind the bunkhouse, a rooster hollered its third complaint of the morning. You going to that church social tomorrow? Jake leaned against the stall door, rolling a cigarette between tobacco-stained fingers. Daniel didn't look up. Might be. Heard Clara Whitmore's basket gonna fetch $5 easy. That gal can cook. Jake struck a match. You ought to bid on it. Pretty thing like her. Cookin' like that. I ain't interested in Clara Whitmore's basket. Jake snorted. Suit yourself. The mare shifted. Daniel kept brushing, but his hands had slowed. His mind was 6 months gone. Back to a January night when the cold had teeth, and his stomach had given up growling. The mining company had let him go 3 days before Christmas. No work, no money, no family left to wire. He'd slept in Miller's livery, buried under hay that smelled of horse and rot, telling himself he'd figure something out come morning. Morning came, then another, then a third. By the fourth day, his hands shook too bad to hold a pitchfork steady. That's when he found it. A bundle on the fence post behind the livery. Brown cloth, tied with kitchen string. Inside half a loaf of bread. A wedge of yellow cheese. 6 dried apple slices. No note. He'd eaten so fast he near choked on the bread. Sat there in the frozen mud, cramming food into his mouth like an animal. Tears and snot running down his face. The next morning, another bundle. Same place, same string. The third morning, he hid behind the water trough and waited. She came just before dawn. A large woman in a gray wool coat, moving quiet for her size. She set the bundle on the post, looked around once, not searching for thanks, just checking she wasn't seen, and walked back toward the house, with the lamp still burning in the kitchen window. Eliza Hartley. She never knew he watched, never asked for a single word of gratitude. Daniel set down the curry comb. Tomorrow was the basket auction. He reached into his pocket and felt the coins he'd been saving. $15, nearly half a month's wages. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. The church lawn smelled of fresh-cut grass and fried chicken. Eliza stood at the edge of the crowd, her basket pressed against her hip. Red and white bunting hung from the oak trees. Children chased each other between the tables while their mothers called after them in voices that carried no real warning. She'd worn her blue calico, the one with the let-out seams that nobody was supposed to notice, but everybody did. The long table near the church steps held 15 baskets, maybe more, each one decorated with ribbons and wildflowers, cloth napkins folded just so. Mary Ellen Porter's had a spray of daisies tied to the handle. Clara Whitmore's was wrapped in pink gingham with a bow that probably took an hour to tie. Eliza set hers at the far end. Plain brown wicker, clean white cloth, no ribbons. She stepped back before anyone could see her hands shaking. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hadley climbed onto the church steps, his auctioneer's voice already warming up. He was a thin man with a gray mustache and a way of making everything sound like the most exciting thing that ever happened in Brookfield. Welcome to the 32nd Annual Church Social Basket Auction. Applause scattered through the crowd. Men gathered closer. Women clustered near the lemonade table, fanning themselves and watching. Eliza found a spot behind Mrs. Greer, whose Sunday hat was wide enough to hide behind. First up, we have a lovely basket from Miss Mary Ellen Porter. Mr. Hadley held it high. The daisies bobbed in the breeze. Do I hear $1? $1 to start. There we go, $1 from Tom Finch. Do I hear $1.50? The bidding climbed. $1.50, $2, $2.25. Sold $2.50 to Mr. Tom Finch. Mary Ellen blushed and ducked her head. Tom Finch grinned like he'd won a horse. The auction moved on. Sarah Benton's basket went for $3. Agnes Moore's for $2.75. Each time, the winning bidder walked forward, collected his basket, and escorted the blushing woman to a spot on the lawn for their shared meal. Eliza watched from behind Mrs. Greer's hat. Her mouth had gone dry. And now, folks, we have a real treat. Mr. Hadley's voice rose another notch. Miss Clara Whitmore's basket. A murmur ran through the men. Clara stood near the front, golden hair catching the sunlight, her waist small enough that both of a man's hands could span it. Do I hear $2? $2, $3? Do I hear $4? The bidding came fast. $4, $4.50, $4.75. $5. $5 from Mr. Samuel Reed. Applause. Clara covered her smile with her hand. Samuel Reed straightened his collar and walked forward like a man who'd just bought the whole territory. Eliza's stomach turned. Her basket was next. She knew it was next. She could see Mr. Hadley reaching for it, his hand hovering over the plain brown wicker. He picked it up, looked at it, looked out at the crowd. Something flickered across his face. Just for a moment. Well now, he cleared his throat. We have here Miss Eliza Hartley's basket. The noise stopped. Not slowly, not gradually, just stopped, like someone had closed a door on it. Eliza felt the silence land on her shoulders, felt it press down, felt every eye in the crowd slide toward her and then away, like she was something they didn't want to look at too long. Do I hear? Mr. Hadley's voice faltered. Do I hear 50 cents to start? Nothing. A fly buzzed past Eliza's ear. Somewhere behind her, a child laughed at something and was quickly shushed. 40 cents. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Eliza's hands found the fabric of her skirt. Her fingers twisted into it, bunching the calico until her knuckles went white. Someone in the back row snickered. A woman's voice she couldn't tell whose whispered something that made two other women cover their mouths. Mr. Hadley looked down at the basket in his hands, looked up at the crowd. His mustache twitched. "Well, I suppose we might—" Heat flooded Eliza's face. Her vision blurred at the edges. She should leave. She should turn around right now and walk home and never show her face in this town again. Her legs wouldn't move. Her feet had grown roots right there in the church lawn, right there in front of everyone who had ever whispered about her, ever laughed at her, ever looked through her like she wasn't even there. 20 seconds now, maybe 30. Mr. Hadley opened his mouth to move on. And then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a voice cut through the silence like a knife through butter. $15. Every head in the crowd turned. Daniel Brooks stood at the back, hat in his hand, dust still on his boots from the morning's ride. He hadn't shaved. His Sunday shirt was clean but worn at the collar, and his jaw was set in a way that said he meant every word. $15, he said again, louder this time. Mr. Hadley's mouth hung open. The basket dangled from his fingers like he'd forgotten he was holding it. Did he say 15? That's 3 times what Clara's went for? The whispers started small and spread fast, rippling through the crowd like wind through wheat. Women leaned toward each other, fans fluttering. Men shifted their weight, exchanging glances that asked questions nobody wanted to say out loud. Eliza couldn't breathe. Her chest had locked up tight, and the edges of her vision had gone strange and bright. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Some ranch hand she barely knew had just bid $15, nearly half a month's wages, for a working man on a basket that nobody wanted. Daniel walked forward. The crowd parted for him, not out of respect, but out of sheer confusion. He moved through them steady and slow, his boots crunching on the dry grass, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere ahead. On her. He stopped in front of Mr. Hadley and reached into his pocket. Silver coins clinked as he counted them out, one by one, into the auctioneer's palm. $15 in dimes and quarters and a few worn dollar coins. Everything he had. Mr. Hadley stared at the money like it might bite him. "Well," he managed, "sold, I suppose, to Mr. Daniel Brooks." Daniel took the basket, turned to face the crowd. "I know what you're all thinking," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The kind of voice that came from working outdoors, from calling to horses across open fields. "You're thinking I've lost my mind. $15 for a basket." Nobody answered. Nobody moved. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in Miller's livery. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mining company let me go right before Christmas. No work, no money, no food for 3 days. Eliza's hands had gone numb. She could feel people looking at her now, really looking, but she couldn't look back. She could only stare at Daniel Brooks and the plain brown basket in his hands. On the 4th morning, I found a bundle on the fence post. Bread, cheese, dried apples. He paused. No note, no name, just food, left by someone who didn't want credit for it. The whispers had stopped. The whole lawn had gone quiet except for the breeze rustling the bunting and a child asking his mother something in a voice too low to hear. I watched the next morning. Wanted to know who it was. Daniel turned and looked directly at Eliza. This woman right here walked out before dawn, left that food, and went home without ever looking back. She did it 3 times? She never once asked for thanks? Never once wanted me to know it was her? Eliza's throat burned. Her eyes burned. Everything burned. So when I hear folks laughing because nobody wants to bid on her basket, Daniel's voice hardened. He turned to face Mrs. Pritchard, who stood frozen near the lemonade table with her fan halfway to her face. Ma'am, I reckon you never went hungry a day in your life. So maybe you don't know what it means when somebody feeds you and don't ask nothing back. Mrs. Pritchard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Daniel looked at the rest of them. The men who'd snickered, the women who'd whispered, the whole town that had spent 30 years looking at Eliza Hartley and seeing only what they wanted to see. You judge her by what's on the outside, he said. I judge her by what she did when nobody was watching. And I'll tell you something. He lifted the basket. This basket right here is worth more than every other basket on that table put together, because it came from the only woman in this town worth a damn. Silence. Then, somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping, slow at first, then faster, then someone else joined in, and someone else, until the applause scattered across the lawn like rain on a tin roof. Daniel walked toward Eliza. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely see him through the blur in her eyes. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell hay and horse, and something else, something clean, like soap. Miss Hartley, he held out his arm. Would you do me the honor of sharing this meal with me? Eliza looked at his arm, looked at his face, looked at the basket she'd packed that morning, never believing anyone would want it. Her hand trembled as she reached out. She took his arm. The crowd parted again as they walked toward the edge of the lawn, toward the creek, where the cottonwood trees gave shade and the noise of the social faded to a distant hum. Behind them, Mr. Hadley cleared his throat and called out the next basket. His voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful, but Eliza didn't hear him. She was thinking about the way Daniel Brooks had looked at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. And she was thinking about what would happen when the auction was over, when the crowd went home, when the town went back to being the town. What happened when a man like him spent half a month's wages on a woman like her? The creek ran shallow here, catching sunlight in ribbons of gold and white. Eliza spread the checkered cloth over a flat patch of grass, her fingers fumbling with the corners. Behind them, the church social continued, but the voices had faded to a distant hum, like bees in a far-off field. Daniel lowered himself to the ground across from her, moving slow, like a man who didn't want to spook a skittish horse. This spot's nice, he said. Quiet? Eliza nodded. She couldn't look at him yet. Her hands shook as she lifted the cloth from the basket and began setting out the food. Fried chicken wrapped in wax paper, sourdough biscuits, a jar of pickled beets with a rusted lid, dried apple pie with a lattice crust that had cracked on one side. I hope it's... She stopped, started again. The chicken might be cold by now. Daniel picked up a drumstick, bit into it, chewed slow, his jaw working, his eyes half closed. Eliza watched his face, couldn't help it, waited for the polite smile, the kind words that meant nothing. He swallowed, looked at her. That's the best fried chicken I ever ate in my life. No smile, no politeness, just fact. The knot in Eliza's chest eased, just a little. She reached for a biscuit, broke it in half, and realized she was hungry for the first time in days. They ate in silence for a while. The creek burbled over smooth stones. A meadowlark called from somewhere in the tall grass. The May breeze carried the smell of wild clover and warm earth. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel set down a chicken bone, wiped his fingers on his trousers. Eliza braced herself. "I suppose, back in January, when you left that food for me." He paused. How'd you know I was there?" She looked down at the biscuit in her hands. "I saw you, going into Miller's livery, 3 nights in a row, same time. A man don't sleep in a barn unless he ain't got nowhere else. You didn't know me from Adam? Didn't need to." Daniel was quiet. The creek kept running. A dragonfly landed on the edge of the blanket, wings catching the light like stained glass, then lifted off again. "Why didn't you ever say nothing?" he asked. "After. When I got the job at Henderson's. I seen you in town a few times. You never once let on." Eliza turned the biscuit over in her hands. The crust left flour on her fingers. "My mama used to say, giving that needs to be known ain't giving at all. It's just trading." Daniel didn't answer right away. He picked up another piece of chicken, but didn't eat it, just held it. "Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was." Eliza's throat tightened. "She passed 2 winters ago. Pneumonia." "I'm sorry." "Me too." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was the other kind, the kind that didn't need filling. "You ever been married, Mr. Brooks?" Daniel shook his head. "Ain't found a woman stubborn enough to put up with me." Eliza's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "I suppose I ain't found a man brave enough to put up with?" She gestured vaguely at herself. Didn't finish. Didn't need to. Daniel set the chicken down. His eyes found hers and stayed there. "Brave ain't got nothing to do with it. Miss Hartley, blind, maybe. Them folks back there?" He nodded toward the distant church. "They blind." Eliza looked away first. The creek blurred in her vision. "You want to hear something funny?" Daniel asked. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "All right." "Last month, Mr. Henderson bought this mule off a trader passing through. Ornery thing. Wouldn't move. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't do nothing but stand there looking at you like you owed him money." Eliza sniffed. "Sounds like Mr. Greer." Daniel's lip curved. "Worse than Greer. At least Greer moves when his wife hollers. This mule, I swear to you, I spent 3 hours trying to get him from the paddock to the barn. 3 hours. Finally got him to the gate. And you know what he did? What? Stopped dead. Just stopped. And I was pulling so hard on that rope that when he stopped, I went face first into the mud. Full body. Mud in my ears. Mud in my mouth." Daniel shook his head. "And that mule just stood there looking at me like I was the stupidest creature the good Lord ever made." It started small. A tremor in Eliza's shoulders. A sound that might have been a cough. Then it broke loose. She laughed. Really laughed. The sound came from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd forgotten existed. It rang out over the water. Startled a sparrow from the grass. Filled the air between them like something alive. She clapped a hand over her mouth, shocked by the noise she'd made. Daniel grinned. The first real grin she'd seen from him. "Don't hide that," he said. Eliza lowered her hand. Her cheeks ached. When was the last time her cheeks had ached from smiling? The meadowlark called again. The creek kept running. The sun moved lower in the sky. And somewhere back at the church, she knew, people were still talking, still whispering, still wondering what Daniel Brooks could possibly want with the fat Hartley girl. She looked at him across the checkered cloth, at this man who'd counted out $15 for a basket nobody wanted. And a new thought crept in, cold and sharp as a splinter. What if they were right? The porch step had been loose for 2 years. Eliza had learned to skip over it, plant her foot on the second board instead, avoid the wobble and the creak. She'd meant to fix it, just never got around to it. Daniel fixed it on Tuesday. He showed up at 7:30 with a hammer and a handful of nails, said he'd noticed it wobbling when he walked her home from the social. Didn't ask permission. Just knelt down and got to work while Eliza stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee she'd forgotten to offer him. On Thursday, he came back with an armload of split firewood, stacked it neat against the side of the house. The pieces fitted together like puzzle parts. "You didn't have to do that," Eliza said from the porch. Daniel straightened up, brushed bark dust from his sleeves. "I know." On Saturday, he brought fence posts. 2 weeks had passed since the church social. 2 weeks of Daniel Brooks showing up at her door with tools and wood, and no explanation beyond a nod and a morning. "Miss Hartley?" Eliza watched him through the kitchen window now, her hands still in the wash basin, soap suds climbing past her wrists. He'd stripped off his work shirt and hung it on a post, his undershirt stuck to his back with sweat as he swung the post hole digger, muscles moving under sun-browned skin. The fence had been falling down since Papa died. 3 years of rot and neglect. She'd told herself it didn't matter. Nobody came out this way anyhow. Now Daniel Brooks was out there in the June heat, digging holes and setting posts like he had nothing better to do with his Saturday. A knock at the front door made Eliza jump. Water splashed over the basin's edge, darkening the floor. "Eliza, you home?" Martha's voice. Eliza dried her hands on her apron and went to the door. Martha Greer stood on the new porch step, a basket of eggs hooked over one arm. Her eyes were already moving past Eliza, scanning the yard, landing on Daniel's bare back at the fence line. "Well," Martha said, "ain't that something?" "Morning, Martha. You want some coffee?" "I want to talk to you." Martha pushed past her into the house, set the eggs on the kitchen table with a thump. "Sit down." Eliza didn't sit. She leaned against the counter and waited. Martha pulled out a chair, settled into it, arranged her skirts. She had a way of doing that, of making herself comfortable in other people's kitchens like she owned them. "Folks are talking," Martha said. "Folks are always talking." "This is different." Martha's voice dropped, took on that syrupy concern that meant trouble was coming. "Eliza, honey, I ain't trying to be cruel. Lord knows I ain't, but somebody's got to say it." "Say what?" Martha glanced toward the window. Daniel was tamping dirt around a post now, his shoulders rolling with the effort. Men like him don't just show up for no reason. Eliza's hands found her apron, twisted the fabric between her fingers. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means he's young, he's handsome, he could have any girl in this county." Martha leaned forward. "So why's he spending his free days fixing fences for a woman who—" She stopped, but the words hung there anyway, loud as a shout. "A woman who looks like you?" "Your daddy left you this land," Martha continued. 40 acres, free and clear, that ain't nothing. And I heard tell there might be money too, from your mama's people back east." "There ain't no money, Martha." "Well, he don't know that, does he?" Martha reached across the table, caught Eliza's hand. Her fingers were cold from the morning air. "Honey, I just don't want to see you get hurt. You got a good heart?" "Too good. And sometimes that makes a person blind to what's right in front of them." Eliza pulled her hand back, slow, gentle, like it didn't sting. "Maybe you're right," she said. Her voice came out flat. "Maybe I'm a fool. Now, I ain't saying you're a fool, but you're thinking it. Eliza turned back to the wash basin, picked up a plate she'd already cleaned. Everybody's always thinking it. Martha stood. The chair scraped against the floor. I'm just trying to help. Eliza. That's all. You've been alone a long time. I understand. But loneliness can make a person see things that ain't there. Eliza didn't turn around. Thank you for the eggs, Martha. A pause, then footsteps. The front door opened and closed. Eliza stood at the basin, the clean plate dripping in her hands. Through the window, she could see Daniel straightening up, wiping his forehead with his arm. He looked toward the house, lifted a hand in a wave. She didn't wave back. That night, she sat alone in the kitchen. The coal oil lamp burned low, throwing shadows on the walls. Her leather journal lay open on the table, the steel nib pen beside it, the ink bottle uncorked. She'd meant to write. She always wrote when she couldn't sleep, but the page stayed blank. Men like him don't just show up for no reason. Eliza stared at the empty page until the lamp guttered and the shadows swallowed the room. What if Martha was right? What if everybody was right? What if the only thing worse than being alone was finding out that hope had been a lie all along? Daniel rode up the lane on Sunday afternoon with a bunch of wildflowers in his hand. Black-eyed Susans and Queen Anne's lace, tied together with a piece of twine. The kind of flowers that grew along fence rows and didn't cost a man nothing but the time to pick them. Eliza saw him coming from the kitchen window. Her hands went still on the bread dough she'd been kneading. Flour dust hung in the air, caught in the slant of afternoon light. She wiped her hands on her apron, took it off, put it back on, took it off again. By the time she reached the front door, he was already climbing the porch steps, the steps he'd fixed, the boards that didn't wobble anymore. Miss Hartley. He held out the flowers. Thought these might brighten up your table. Eliza didn't take them. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed over her chest, blocking the entrance like she was guarding something. Mr. Brooks, I appreciate you coming by, but Daniel. What? My name's Daniel. You can use it. She looked at the flowers in his hand, at the dirt under his fingernails, at the way he stood there, patient as a man waiting for rain. I appreciate everything you've done, she said. The porch, the fence, the firewood. But folks are talking, and it ain't proper for you to keep coming around like this. Daniel's jaw tightened. Since when do you care what folks say? Since always. The words came out sharp, sharper than she'd meant. I just learned to pretend I didn't. He lowered the flowers. His eyes stayed on her face, searching for something she couldn't give him. Eliza, you don't owe me nothing anymore. Mr. Brooks, she kept her voice flat, steady, like she was reading from a ledger. Whatever debt you think you had, it's paid. The fence is worth more than a few scraps of bread and cheese. Something flickered across his face, not anger. Something worse. That what you think this is, me paying off a debt? Eliza's throat burned. She swallowed hard. I think you're a good man who felt obligated to a woman who helped him once, and I think you've done more than enough to settle that account. That ain't, please. Her voice cracked on the word. She hated it. Hated the weakness it showed. I can't be your charity project. I can't be the woman you saved. I got enough people in this town looking at me like I'm something to be pitied. I don't need you doing it too. Daniel stood very still. The flowers hung at his side, wilting already in the heat. Is that what you think this is? he asked again, quieter now. Pity. Eliza couldn't answer. If she opened her mouth, something would come out that she couldn't take back. Tears or words or both. Daniel stepped closer. She stepped back, bumping against the doorframe. You know what I think, Miss Hartley. His voice was low, rough at the edges. I think you've been alone so long, you don't know what to do when somebody shows up. I think you're scared. And I think pushing me away is easier than finding out if I might stay. The words hit her like stones. Each one true. Each one unbearable. You don't know anything about me, she whispered. I know you fed a stranger when you had no reason to. I know you did it 3 times and never once asked for thanks. I know you got more kindness in you than this whole town put together. And they're too blind to see it. He set the flowers down on the porch railing, stepped back. I ain't going nowhere, Eliza. But I ain't gonna stand here begging neither. He put his hat on, turned, walked down the steps and across the yard toward his horse. Eliza watched him go. Her chest ached like something had torn loose inside it. The flowers sat on the railing, yellow and white against the weathered wood. She should take them inside, put them in water. That's what a normal woman would do. She grabbed them instead, walked to the edge of the porch, meant to throw them into the yard, throw away the evidence of his kindness, throw away the hope she couldn't afford to keep. Her foot caught on the top step, the one board he hadn't replaced. She went down hard. Her hands flew out but found nothing. Her body pitched forward, and then she was falling, tumbling. The flowers scattering as she hit the ground at the bottom of the steps and rolled into the muddy ditch beside the porch where last week's rain had pooled and turned the earth to black muck. She landed on her back. Mud soaked through her dress, her hair, her skin. The smell of rot and wet earth filled her nose. Her elbow stung where it had scraped the step. She lay there staring up at the sky, covered in filth, and heard the sound of hoofbeats stop. Daniel's face appeared above her. He'd turned back. Of course he'd turned back. She saw herself through his eyes, a fat woman lying in a ditch, covered in mud. Flowers scattered around her like a joke the good Lord was playing. And then, before she could stop it, before she could remember how to be dignified or proud or any of the things she'd spent her whole life pretending to be, a sound came out of her throat. Not crying, laughing, horrible. Broken laughter that shook her whole body and sent tears streaming down her mud-caked face. Daniel stared at her, and then, slowly, he started to laugh too. He reached down his hand. 2 weeks passed like stones, sinking in deep water. Eliza baked bread every morning. The smell filled the house, yeast and flour and warmth, and she ate it alone at the kitchen table, slice after slice until her stomach hurt and the loaf was gone. Then she baked another one. She didn't go to town. Didn't need to. Had enough flour and salt and lard to last the month. Had enough loneliness to last longer than that. The flowers had died on the porch railing. She'd left them there after Daniel pulled her out of the mud. After she'd laughed until she couldn't breathe and then sent him away again with her dress dripping and her pride in tatters. They'd wilted in the sun, turned brown, curled in on themselves like fists. She should throw them out. Every morning she walked past them. Every morning she didn't. Every night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. I ain't going nowhere. Eliza, but I ain't gonna stand here begging neither. She'd turn onto her side, punch the pillow, tell herself she'd done the right thing, tell herself it was better this way. By the 10th night, she'd stopped believing it. By the 12th night, she'd started walking past her mother's old room, pausing at the door, her hand hovering over the knob before she pulled it back and walked away. On the 15th day, she stopped walking away. The cedar chest sat in the corner of the room, under the window where the light came in, dusty and gold. Eliza hadn't opened it since the funeral. Hadn't been able to. The smell alone, cedar and lavender, and something else. Something that was just Mama would undo her. But today her hands found the brass latch. Today her fingers lifted the lid. The smell hit her first. She closed her eyes and breathed it in. And for one moment her mother was alive again, standing at the stove, humming that hymn she loved, the one about amazing grace. Eliza opened her eyes. The chest held the usual things. A wedding dress, yellowed with age, wrapped in tissue paper. A pair of kid gloves, too small for Eliza's hands. A bundle of letters tied with ribbon, Papa's letters, from before they were married, when he'd been working the silver mines up in Leadville. And at the bottom, the family Bible. Eliza lifted it out. The leather cover was soft with age, the pages edged in gold that had worn to brown. She opened it to the family record in the front. Her grandmother's name, her grandfather's, her parents' wedding date, her own birth. Written in Mama's careful hand, Eliza Ruth Hartley, born March 3rd, 1857. She turned the pages. Genesis, Exodus. The tissue-thin paper whispered under her fingers. A dried rose fell out somewhere in Psalms, and with it, a letter. Eliza unfolded the paper. Her mother's handwriting looked up at her. Brown ink on cream paper. The letters slanted and familiar as her own face in the mirror. My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know you, and I do know you, better than you know yourself, you're sitting alone somewhere, convincing yourself that alone is safer than sorry. Eliza's hands trembled. The paper shook. I want to tell you something I never told you while I was alive. Something about your father and me. When I met William Hartley, I was 23 years old and I had already decided I would never marry. I was plain. I was poor. I had nothing to offer a man except hard work and a sharp tongue, and I figured no man would want either. Your father saw me at a church picnic in Council Bluffs. I was sitting alone, much like you do now, I imagine, and he walked straight up to me and asked if he could share my lunch. I said no. I said no 5 more times that summer. I told him I wasn't interested. I told him he was wasting his time. I told him there were prettier girls with better prospects and he'd be a fool to keep coming around. He kept coming. And do you know what finally changed my mind? It wasn't his persistence. It wasn't his kindness. It was something he said to me one evening, when I'd been particularly cruel, when I'd said things designed to drive him away for good. He said, "Martha, I ain't trying to save you. I just want to know you. That's all. Just to know you." Fear told me I wasn't enough. Love told me to try anyway. Love was right. Eliza couldn't see the words anymore. They'd gone blurry, swimming in salt water. My darling girl, you have always given love freely. You feed the hungry and clothe the cold, and never once ask for thanks. You got a heart bigger than this whole territory. But one day, you must learn to receive. Receiving is harder than giving. I know. It means letting someone see you, really see you, and trusting they won't turn away. It means being brave enough to be seen. I don't know who will come for you. Eliza, but someone will, and when they do, I pray you'll be brave enough to let them. All my love, now and always. Mama Eliza sat on the floor of her mother's room, the letter in her lap, and wept. She wept for her mother, gone 2 years now. She wept for her father, gone longer. She wept for the girl she'd been, the one who'd learned to make herself small, to expect nothing, to build walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore. She wept until her chest was empty and her eyes were raw and the light through the window had shifted from gold to orange. Then she stood up. She washed her face in the basin. The water turned gray with tears and dust. She dried her skin with a clean cloth, looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Red eyes, blotchy cheeks, hair coming loose from its pins. She looked like a woman who'd been crying for an hour. She looked like a woman who was done hiding. Eliza went to her wardrobe, pulled out her Sunday dress, the good one, with the pearl buttons that Mama had sewn on the year before she died. She'd never worn it, had told herself she was saving it for something special. She put it on now, buttoned each pearl with steady fingers, pinned her hair back, didn't bother with powder or rouge. Daniel had seen her covered in mud. He could see her covered in truth. The sun was setting when she walked out the front door. The Henderson Ranch was 3 miles east, a long walk in the fading light. Her good shoes would be ruined by the time she got there. She started walking anyway. The sky turned pink, then purple, then deep blue at the edges. Stars came out, one by one. Eliza's feet raised dust on the dirt road, and her legs ached with every step. But she kept moving. With every stride she rehearsed what she would say. I was afraid. I've been afraid my whole life. But I'm done being afraid. The ranch house came into view just as the last light bled from the sky. Lamps glowed in the windows. Somewhere, a dog barked. Eliza smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, walked up to the front door, and knocked. Mrs. Henderson opened it, a dish towel in her hands, surprise on her face. Miss Hartley? What in the world? I'm looking for Mr. Daniel Brooks. Eliza's voice didn't shake. I have something to say to him. Daniel heard her footsteps before he saw her. He turned from the horse, brush in hand. And there she was, standing at the edge of the corral in the moonlight, wearing a dress he'd never seen before. Pearl buttons caught the light. Her hair was pinned back neat, but loose strands framed her face. She looked like she'd been crying. She looked like she'd walked 3 miles in the dark. She looked like the bravest thing he'd ever seen. Eliza. Her name came out rough. He cleared his throat, set down the brush on the fence rail. She didn't move, just stood there, hands clasped in front of her, chest rising and falling like she'd been running. I need to say something, she said. And I need to say it before I lose my nerve. Daniel waited. I was afraid. Her voice cracked on the word. She pressed on anyway. I've been afraid my whole life. Afraid of what people think. Afraid of wanting things I can't have. Afraid of hoping. The horse shifted behind him. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, someone laughed. The sounds felt far away. They taught me I wasn't worth wanting, Eliza said. My whole life, that's what they taught me. Every whisper, every look, every time somebody crossed the street so they wouldn't have to walk past me. Her chin trembled, but she held it up. I believed them. I believed them for 26 years. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides, not from anger at her, and from anger at every person who'd ever made her feel small. "And then you showed up," she continued. "You paid $15 for my basket and you told the whole town I was worth something. And I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't." She took a step closer. Then another. Her shoes were ruined, caked with dust from the road. "Martha said you must want something. Land. Money. Something." Eliza's laugh was short and sharp. "And part of me believed her too. Because that's easier. Isn't it easier to think you're being fooled than to think somebody might actually—" She couldn't finish. Her voice gave out. Daniel crossed the distance between them. 3 steps. 4. He stopped close enough to see the tears on her lashes, the pulse jumping in her throat. "They were wrong," he said. "All of them. Every single one." Eliza shook her head. "You don't have to. I ain't done." His voice was quiet, but steady. "You fed me when I had nothing. Not scraps. Real food. The kind that takes time to make. You did it 3 times, and you never once looked for thanks. You never once wanted credit. You just saw a hungry man, and you fed him. That's it. That's who you are." The moonlight caught the tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "I didn't pay $15 because I felt sorry for you, Eliza. I paid it because I knew that basket came from the only woman in this town worth anything at all. The only one who ever saw me when I was at my lowest and didn't look away." Her breath caught. "I ain't here to save you," Daniel said. "I'm here because you already saved me. 6 months ago, in the worst time of my life. You saved me. And I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that ever since." He reached up, slow, so she could pull away if she wanted. His rough hand touched her cheek, calluses against soft skin. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed on his. "I ain't gonna promise you it'll be easy," he said. "Folks talk. They always gonna talk." "I know. But I ain't going nowhere. Not this time. Not ever." Eliza's hand came up, covered his. Her fingers were cold from the night air, but they held on tight. "Then I reckon I ain't neither," she whispered. 1 year later, the church lawn smelled the same. Fresh-cut grass and fried chicken. Bunting in the oak trees. Children chasing each other between the tables. But this time, Eliza didn't stand at the edge of the crowd. She stood near the front, her hand resting on the arm of her husband. The gold band on her finger caught the May sunshine. Her dress was new blue cotton with white trim, and it fit her just right because she'd sewn it herself. Without apology, without hiding. Mr. Hadley climbed the church steps with his auctioneer's voice already warming up. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 33rd Annual Church Social Basket Auction." Applause scattered through the crowd. More people this year. Word had spread about last year's auction. About the cowboy who'd bid $15 on a basket nobody wanted. Some folks had come just to see what would happen next. "First up," Mr. Hadley said, reaching for the table, "we have a basket from $5. Daniel's voice rang out before the auctioneer could finish. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Mr. Hadley grinned behind his mustache. "Well now, Mr. Brooks, don't you want to know whose basket it is first? Don't need to?" Daniel squeezed Eliza's hand. "I know whose it is." More laughter. A few people clapped near the lemonade table. Mrs. Pritchard pressed her lips together and looked away, but she didn't say anything. Not anymore. Sold. Mr. Hadley lifted the basket high. $5 to Mr. Daniel Brooks for his wife's basket. Again. Daniel collected the basket with one hand, kept hold of Eliza with the other. They walked together toward the creek, toward the spot where they'd shared their first meal, where she'd laughed for the first time in years. Behind them, the auction continued. Other baskets, other bids, other stories beginning. Eliza looked up at her husband, at this man who'd seen her at her lowest, covered in mud, covered in fear, and hadn't turned away. "You know," she said, "you could have waited, saved yourself some money." Daniel spread the blanket under the cottonwood tree, the same spot as before. "Couldn't risk it," he said. "Some other fella might have outbid me." Eliza laughed. The sound carried across the water, mixed with the meadowlark's song, rose up into the wide Colorado sky. And this time, she didn't cover her mouth. There's a quiet that comes after a story like this. Not the silence of an empty room, but something fuller, heavier, the kind that settles in your chest and asks to stay a while. Perhaps you know what it feels like to carry kindness in secret, to give without being seen, to wonder if anyone notices the small good you put into the world. Many of us have stood in rooms full of people and felt completely alone. Some of us have learned to expect less than we deserve, simply because expecting less hurts less when it doesn't come. And some of us, maybe, have been the one who showed up, the one who saw what others missed, the one who stayed when staying wasn't easy. These feelings don't need to be fixed or figured out. They're allowed to rest exactly where they are. Not every ache requires an answer. Not every tender place needs to heal today. It's enough, sometimes, just to have listened, just to have remembered, just to have felt something familiar move through you like an old hymn you haven't heard in years. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end.